if it's not one thing, it's another. I'm sure you've heard that before. And I'm sure sometimes it feels like that for sure. Especially if you have a childhood or even just an adult life where it feels like for an extended period of time, things keep happening and they thwart all of your plans for good and they are shifting you in a different direction. They are causing pain and heartache and trauma. All of those things happen to humans on a pretty consistent basis, even when we don't think about them in that way. And that's what I want to talk about today. From that perspective of what we think about matters. So if you're not familiar, my name is Stephanie and I'm a mental health coach, and I work with business owners, creatives, people who are trying to get things done, and sometimes are struggling a little bit, whether it is from not being able to prioritize things and they need a project manager, or whether that is dealing with their mental health. And the reason that I wanted to talk to you today about the reticular activating system is because this is a system that I have found that controls much of our behavior, and its whole entire design is to keep us safe. So when you think about the reticular activating system, you can think about fight or flight responses, right? So it is a system that works with chemicals in our brain and hormones in our body to release things that put us into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flow response. And yes, I did name 5 of them. You're probably familiar with fight or flight. That's what most people are familiar with, but we also have freeze. And if you look at humans, especially nowadays, we also have flow, where we dive into work and we focus on being in flow and distracted all the time. And then we also have fawn, which is a people-pleasing behavior. So all of that said, let's get back to the reticular activating system. So this system controls that functionality. But what it does is it does that in an instantaneous response. So your brain is constantly taking in new information all the time. It's constantly determining if something is safe. Is that email safe? Is that leaf outside safe? The wind is blowing. Is it safe? And so as it takes in information and it determines whether it's safe, the way that we have evolved, this is a pretty cool superpower. The way that we have evolved is by taking in that information and within just a split second being able to make a determination. Now, this doesn't happen on a regular basis. This happens from the time that we are super, super small. This is why kids know no fear, right? If you've ever been around a toddler in a staircase, you know that they don't know any fear. They don't understand that if they go to drop off the staircase, that they might fall, right? Kids don't understand all the time that if they're on a monkey bar way up at the top of a play area, right, that they might fall. It's not even a concept necessarily that's in their brains. We have to train them. We have to educate them. We have to condition them that, hey, some things aren't necessarily safe. Jumping out of a 2-story window isn't safe, right? Putting your finger into a light socket isn't safe. And if we don't teach them and they do it, then they find out the hard way. So your brain uses a series of information, whether that is finding out the hard way, being told by other people, or even just perceiving information and making logical conclusions from them. So if you've been disappointed in your life, or you've struggled with, things not working out your way, or feeling like you've gotten to an end of a challenge only to have something come back up, or you feel like you've been on this roller coaster of ups and downs recently, there's so many different things that could be going on in your life right now. But what I want to just share with you is that the way that our brain works is that it works in that way of finding that information and then working to prove one way or another. So if you believe that your life is hard, that it's challenging, that you're struggling, your brain will look for evidence to reinforce that belief. And this is what we call confirmation bias. So If you haven't heard of that term, you can look it up. A lot of other people will share with you, but it's essentially the biggest analogy and the most frequent analogy that is heard with it is the car analogy, where if you've ever bought a new car or had a loved one that you are with buy a new car, you may not have seen that car on the road before, but now you see it everywhere. That's confirmation bias in action. And this works within us relating to the rest of the world. So if we believe that things will work out and we're dealing with something that's a long-term issue, right? Something like maybe a business issue, right? Where you have things that you're working on in your business and you want them to go well, and you truly believe that they will go well, you will look for evidence to do that. The thing about confirmation bias, though, and the way that it works in the real world is that very often we get confirmation that something's not going to work or it's not going to be the way that we thought it was. And when we look at that in the scope of tackling a challenge, if we have had enough upsets or disappointments in our life, it's really hard to look at a challenge and to believe that it's going to work out this time, because it feels like all the other times it hasn't worked out. And so this is one of the challenges with our brain. Because our brain is meant to protect us, it takes in the information that could potentially harm us and it gives more weight to that. So if we've had a situation where we have had a cancer diagnosis, right? And we have went through different treatments and then went into remission and then had the cancer return, we may think, right, that may be a sign for your brain that, oh, well, it's not going to work the next time. It didn't work the first time. It's not going to work the next time. And so your brain then takes that information and it starts to look for evidence, right? So you might start to feel a little bit sicker. Whereas normally you were feeling the same way, but your brain is now sensing that you're sicker. It's looking for evidence that you're going to continue to get sick, that the treatments aren't going to work, even when they might be. And the reason that I find this topic so interesting and so important is because in my life, I've dealt with disappointment, just like all of us have. And it wasn't until I learned this factor and then realized how much of my focus was on proving myself right, that I also realized that I was participating in self-sabotaging behaviors. So I would want to start a business, or I'd want to take my business in a different direction. And I thought, well, it's worked this way for so long, but if I do it this other way, it's not going to work because it didn't work the last time. But the last time was just one time or just for a couple of days. And so I would participate in this act of, this isn't working, I need to find something else, because I didn't believe wholeheartedly that I could be successful. And it was only as I really started to understand how this impacted me, both with my depression 14 years ago, with my relationships, with who I am as a person, with work, with career, with business, that I started to realize like how much our reticular activating system really shapes the way that we perceive the world around us. And this is where we can get into this kind of loop with our brain, where we perceive that this is happening. And that adds to the bias, right? It adds to the evidence pile that, oh, I've perceived that I'm getting sicker or that business isn't working. And so therefore it confirms my belief that I'm going to get sicker and I'm not going to get well, or that I'm not going to do well in business. And then because that's confirmed, then our brain starts to look for more evidence. And then we perceive again, and then it adds more evidence. And so just by shifting that perspective shifting, right? Just by shifting the perspective and starting to look for evidence that counteracts what you believe, you will start to break the process that the reticular activating system spins you in. So that's why I wanted to talk about this today. I want you to kind of focus on what is it that you believe and what evidence are you looking for and how can you shift that moving forward. So I hope this helps. Give me a like, give me a follow, and I will see you later.